Casting with Ceri Jones.
Hi guys, and welcome to this week's podcast. It's that time of year again when I put together a selection of every episode from the last 12 months. And as usual, there are too many for one episode, so I split them into two parts. This week is part 1, which includes January through to June. Part 2, July to December, will be put up next week. I hope you've enjoyed listening to them as much as I have making them. So sit back and relax with a glass and mince pie and enjoy. Merry Christmas, guys. Nadolig Llawen. Episode 165, Dan O'Neill. How did you get the job, you can say, at 14?
Yeah, so really, when I was probably maybe 13, just turning 14 perhaps, and my mum was working there and she got me a job as linen porter. So my duties were to bring linen on different floors so that the staff that were making the bedrooms or whatever didn't have to carry them. So I was up and down doing the donkey work. But I remember one day I was in the basement is where the linen room was. So I was down the basement loading up the bags, and they were those horrible kind of woven threaded bags, and they really used to skin your knuckles.
Right.
I remember carrying it down this big long corridor, and the corridor could not be any longer. The worst thing you could do is look up, because you could see the door and it seemed like it was 10 miles away. So the best thing to do was just look down and you'd eventually get there. So I was looking down, arched over, carrying this big heavy bag, got to the bottom of the stairs, went to go up them, and on the second step there was a fly stuck in the carpet. So I was looking and thought, I know that fly. So I dropped the bag, took the fly out, and it was a barbed hook, so it took a little bit of doing, but I got it out. And the fishing room was about, I don't know, it was maybe halfway down the corridor. So I walked back and I gave a little tap on the door, and Matt, the fisheries manager, was there. So I walked in and I said, sorry, excuse me, Matt, I found this on the carpet. It's a fly. It's a bloody butcher. And the minute I said bloody butcher, he turned around and he looked over his glasses at me and he said, how do you know what that is? And I said, I do a lot of fishing with my dad. And he said, oh, right, okay. Thanks very much, young man. He said, just leave it there on the mantelpiece. I'll get it later on. He said, it could be a lucky one. Right, fair enough. So I went off about my duties anyway. And about, I'd say maybe a week or 2 weeks later, I was going home. And I always used to go out the back door of the manor house, because you had to walk by the front of the manor house then and you could look at the river. So I always used to be looking down at the river as I was walking past.
Yeah.
And as I was walking along the front, Matt was pacing up and down with an old phone, like a red brick, a huge big thing.
Yeah.
And he was poking and pressing buttons. I don't really think he knew what he was doing with it. But anyway, he thought he was talking to someone. But I said, Matt, are you okay? And he goes, no, I'm not. He must be being let down now. The guide is meant to be down here. Gilly's meant to come down and bring a gentleman fishing. He's standing down there at the bottom of the hill. And he said, there's no sign he won't answer his phone. I can't get him. And I said, right, I'll take him. And he said, would you be able? I said, yeah, no problem. I'll go down there now and I'll take him. What do I need? And he said, well, he has all his stuff. He said, just go inside and throw a pair of hip waders on you and see that bag. He said, bring that with you. So I did anyway. Threw on the stuff, went down the hill and said, hi. Chris was the man's name. I'm not sure of his second name, but I went down and said, hi, Chris, how are you? And he said, very well. I said, my name is Dan. And I was talking to Matt and he asked me to gilly for you. And he said, oh, perfect. He said, come on in here beside me. So now I was only there to put a net under a fish. That was it. He didn't need any help from me. He was a very experienced angler. And as luck would have it, I suppose, he hit a fish about 12 pounds. Now, it was absolutely, I had no input whatsoever into him catching that fish. That was all him. But I did net it successfully, thankfully. There's been times since now where I haven't been great with the net, but in this particular, everything went right. But the salmon was tired, come up its side. I was able to net the fish. Everything went well. Matt was delighted. And from there, then, it just took off.
170, James Cosmo.
Beautiful flies, absolutely gorgeous. And he said, I want to give you this as a present. But there's a story behind this. And he said, the guy that tied these, he said, when he was about, I don't know, late teens or early 20s or whatever, a country boy, he got into a fight or whatever in a bar, and he shot this guy, killed him stone dead. And he got a life sentence. Boom. In the jail. Now, he took up fly tying, and over the years he got better and better and better. And this guy said, I used to buy all the flies from him because people were saying, these are fantastic, they're really good. And this poor man had nothing else to do but tie flies and invent patterns and everything else. Anyway, he came up, he was in his 40s or whatever, came up for parole. And the guy that owned the fishing shop said to him, he said, you'll never tie another fly when you leave the prison if you get parole. And the guy said, you know what? He said, I've been tying flies for over 20 years. He said, it's all I can do. I've just got to tie flies. I said, wow, what happened? And he said, he got parole. He discovered women and drink, and he never tied another fly again. No. So these are really rare.
167, Nick Warren.
Especially in the summer, there's a specific way of fishing the pools on the Rio Grande. You'll be using a double-handed rod. You'll be using a lot of the times a Skagit line because the tips you use are very heavy. It's like T17, T20, 10, 15 foot, sometimes 24 foot of the heaviest sink tip you can get, just to get them the fly right down deep in the pools. You'll be losing. Right. Your leader is about 4 foot long, no more than that. Because obviously, if your sink tip is going down, if you're on a long leader, your fly is going to be right up in the water. It needs to be at the bottom, and you're using small nymphs. The pool was quite short but deep, and so you cast across. And what we don't tend to do in the UK sea trout fishing, which they do here, is you feed line off the reel. So you mend and then you strip 12 foot of line off the reel and you dump it. So
down.
Your tip goes down, and then you do a very slow up and down jig. You don't pull the line back in. It's just forwards, backwards, 6 inches, forwards, backwards, and they just thump it. And the fish took, and I thought, oh, it's a good fish. It was just like that head shaking thing. And then it jumped out of the middle of the pool, and it would just look massive, Ceri.
Wow.
Absolutely.
176, my guide to Chew Valley. So now I will take you around the lake and some of the preferred areas I like to fish. As you leave Woodford Lodge, travelling in an anti-clockwise direction around the lake, the first place you come to is Villis Bay. Now this is probably, together with Heron's Green, is the most popular areas and fished most than any other part of the lake. And I usually find it fishes best if there's an east wind. You know, an east wind usually isn't a great wind, but when a fish blows from the east and chew, it means the wind is blowing into the bays. And usually, with stockfish especially, they usually go and travel with the wind. So if there's a northeasterly, that's the area I would try. I do like to prefer to fish in it with the wind blowing in. For some reason, it doesn't fish as good when the wind's blowing out. But you expect it to be. If there's a west or a southwest, you'd think as a warmer wind, you would get more fish. But it always fishes better when the wind's blowing into it. And it's usually the first line of attack. Most people, when they go out, they head for these two bays. Now, in between these two bays is Nunnery Point. And it's a strange one for me. The point itself goes right out into the lake. You know, there's a spit, and it's quite shallow. And it's one of the first places which weeds up. I've never had a bags of fish from there. But it's always good for a fish or two. So what I find is if I'm fishing Villis, and you're heading then round the corner into Heron's Green, it's always good to have a drift or two at the point of nunnery, in the shallow water, and more often not, you will pull a fish or two, especially on the dries. 180, Dave Vegan.
We had a lot of practice done. I had a lot of practice done, but the team had a lot of practice done. And like winning the Brown Bowl, yeah, it's great, but you don't really take ownership of a prize like that, because it's of a result because of the amount of work that the team puts in. Yeah, well, I remember that morning. I convinced Ian. Okay, I know where the fish are. I think he had a fair idea that he could trust that I wanted to go where there was fish. You know, he had 3 fish within 20 minutes, and I eventually got one after about an hour. And I was behind for a little bit, but
What were you fishing? Wets?
wets, yeah, fishing them on a tree sweep.
All right.
Yeah, the team again. We figured out that early in the month, maybe 6 weeks before, and that the tree sweep was the line that was going to be most productive. Flies, you know what? Flies are second. Most flies will catch fish, you know, when they pull them. But yeah, we had tweaked a couple, and they worked. They worked really well.
170, Alan Rees.
That is the art of angling. Looking at the conditions and thinking, yeah, I might not have what I want, but this will make it work. And then
There's other ways of catching.
Getting a fish on the bank. I've been thinking, what are my flies doing? I'm looking, trying to visualize the topography of the river and speed of the current, and all I can say is I'm thinking about my flies in a similar way as when the Space Invaders ship, you know, the flying saucer in Space Invaders is coming over. I'm trying to meet my bullets there. You know, I know where the fish are in the water, or I'm guessing where the fish are, and I'm thinking, I'm casting my flies and I'm trying to visualize where my flies are in that water and flow, based on what I'm feeling and how far I've cast, and trying to see those flies in 3D in my head and thinking, right, they're in the zone now. I'm expecting a take any sec. Oh, there's a take. Purely because of the mental picture I formed from fishing those pools or those rivers.
It helps to do that at night easier than in the day as well.
Yeah.
Because your mind, you can't see nothing in the dark.
No.
So you're drawing a picture. It's easier to do that in the dark, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is.
177, Martha Leeming.
These fish are big. So it was a huge fish. And I was like all over the place, but I netted and I was super happy. Then you have to do the deeds, put it in the boat. Shortly after, I had another one. And this one was bigger, which was amazing, even more amazing. And I netted it, same again, on the deeds. And after a while, a boat was passing by. And this guy that we already have been speaking through the process, this guy called Ian, said who you were coming with and why did you arrive here. And I told him about my husband. So he said, oh, I think that's your husband in that boat. And now we're like, oh, quick, pick up the fish. So I picked up the fish to show him. And he was passing by and I was just showing my 2 fish with a massive grin on my face. And he was like, he didn't recognize me. He was like, what is that person showing me that fish? Like he was all upset. And then his boat partner said, I think that's your wife, the one that you arrived with. And she was like, what? What's she doing here? She was like, it was really fun. That moment was priceless. Anyways, got to the end of the competition and I had the biggest fish of the competition.
Well done.
So this was a massive thing, European Championship. 173,
Ferox Red Letter Day. Come near the boat, and they kept going again and back and forth. And after a lengthy battle now, it was just under the boat. These ferox got I don't know what it is, they love to go under the boat. And then, so this, what I do then is to actually stand in the middle of the boat, waiting to see which way it's going to go, because they just go under and then they'll run under. So then you've got to go to whichever end it's near to put the rod in the water, not for it to get snagged under the boat, under the keel. So anyway, after a while, we waited and waited. Just give it enough line. If it needs line, just give it line. There's no point rushing the fight at this stage now. If our fish wants to go, you give it line. You waited days to get the fish like this on. Enjoy the fight. Anyway, after a while, the fish came to the net. And what a fish it was. After a quick couple of photographs, she went back. And that made my day. That brought a big smile on my face. It's been a tough couple of weeks. And to get that fish finally in the boat, you can imagine how I felt. We estimated it at around between 13 and 14 pounds. A safe 13. I didn't weigh it. Unless it's a high teen now, the 17 or thereabouts. I wouldn't weigh it, I just estimated. 168. Tim Small, Lechlade and Bushyleys.
Some brownies on the farm, which I think that we're going to beat that.
You've got 20s in there, have you?
Oh, I've got some big brownies.
Wow. And they've been brought on from £2.
Yeah. No, they're a bit slower to grow, and they need a bit more food to get them up to size. But you know, they've always got perfect fins, and as you said, the one you caught, they look absolutely lovely. The ones here, they're not very much trouble once you've got them going. They're pretty good.
I guess I can see why you want to put them in before March.
Oh, I don't want to send them for another summer.
Because they disappear as well, don't they? Even if they're in the lake.
And they disappear.
Yeah. I found that when I'm fishing for the big ferox in Ireland. You know, you would catch them March, April, May, and part of June. But you know what? July and August is as if it's devoid of any big fish.
Well, when I started, the fishing season, even on still waters, was 1st of April till the end of September. I'm shut between those months now. And we got that reversed for enclosed still waters back in the early 80s, I should think. And then I pushed really hard because most big brownies that were being stocked were triploids. And there was still a closed season for brown trout, even in enclosed still waters. And I think it must have been about 1990. I went on a one-man crusade and got that changed. There wouldn't be any fishing if we were still on the old seasons.
184, Rob Connor. I got to take my hat off as well. We had a good boatman that night as well, didn't we?
Ted,
yeah. He's probably the most photographed fishing dog on social media.
He's the best known dog on social media, I'd say. Yeah, he's gas. I've actually been down at lakes before, and I've heard people talk and point him out and say, "Oh, Jesus, that's the dog that is on Facebook, or that's the dog that's on Instagram."
And when I saw these pictures you sent, was it today or yesterday? I can't remember when you sent them, and I thought, Jesus, I wonder if you taught him to actually use a GoPro yet.
Yeah, he's got plenty of education watching us anyway, taking photographs, you know.
What was quite cute as well at the end, when it was dark, must have been 11 o'clock when we were coming in, and you could see he was getting excited, and he was standing on the seat in the middle of the boat, and I thought, what's he up to now then? Is he just excited because we're going in? And the next thing, you just give him the nod, and he jumps in, and he swims the last the last 100 yards alongside the boat then.
He's mad. Like, I wouldn't ever again recommend getting a border collie for as a boat dog, because they're just too hyper and energetic. Like, but he's a great old companion. You know.
165. My winter tactics. Now, recently I went to Elladine with David Hoppy. We actually did a feature for the Journal, which is coming out now in a couple of weeks' time. And the lake was 80% covered in ice. Now, there are 3, maybe a few more areas which I focus on when I go to a water. And these 3 things actually came together in one day. And the first one, if you're out and there's ice on the water, for some reason, the trout like to be on the edge because there's great cover for them. They can come out into the open water, and if something spooks them, or they just don't feel right, they'll just swim under the ice. And even though I was casting along the edge of the ice, what seemed to be working better was face the lip of the ice, not casting along the edge of it. I was casting full on straight onto the ice, and the fly would land on the ice. So then by retrieving a figure of 8, the fly was coming off the edge and dropping into the water. And I had a number of fish doing this. And it was strange. It was almost, there come a time, it was only a short window of about 20 minutes I was getting this action. But it's as if the fish were waiting then. And at one time, the fly didn't have a chance to enter the water when the fish would come and just savagely take it and run back under the ice. And we had a few that morning. And surprisingly enough, they were all tigers. 183, Chris Haig. You were fishing the Euro nymph, the French leader. Now, I've done a little bit of that in the past. And in some of the rivers here, you do tend to lose the point fly a lot because it's quite bouldery and there's snags. But I noticed, I was watching you fishing, because I didn't fish in the morning, I just watched you and Alan, and you weren't getting snagged at all. And it wasn't until actually you showed me after that you didn't actually have a fly on the point, did you?
No, because it's single fly only carry through summer. So, and that water was quite fast, if you remember where we were. Yeah. So to get the nymph down quick, what I usually do is drop shot it. I'll usually put a piece of shot on point and then tie a dropper in and use a single fly just above it. So for me, that means my drop shot is bouncing the bed of the river and my fly is presenting perfectly just above it where they're going to be looking. So it's worked really, it's been a really successful method for me. And sometimes even in winter, when we're allowed to use 2 flies, I'll still drop shot in really fast water, but then put 2 smaller flies on 2 droppers above.
Yeah. There's less chance of snagging, obviously, then as well, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And it's worked really well for me. It was just something that, I mean, other people might have used it, but it was just something I come up with to so I could use more weight to get my fly down quicker, and I can only use 1 fly. So I just thought, yeah, I'll drop shot this, and I thought about putting drop shot on the dropper, but then I thought I'm going to struggle with my fly snagging the bottom. So I always do it the other way around: drop shot the bottom and then tie my nymph on the dropper.
Yeah. 174, Anthony McCann.
I try and tie every night, Kerry. So I've a little light hand desk and shells and posters, photographs, and I've put over the garage basically. I want to try and make things a little bit more lighthearted and enjoy myself. And the biggest thing I want to do this year, and I want to try and push myself towards this, is when I go fishing with my dad. We'll go down to the river, and I'm like a child. The day before we go down, I'm like a child on Christmas Eve. I'm so excited about getting to go fishing, and it just brings out the little boy in you. But when we get to the river, I'm set up within 2 minutes, and I'm buzzing waders on, I'm ready to get stuck in. And my dad just, calmly walks down, sits at the edge of the river, sits, has a cigarette, and just sits in quiet for a couple of minutes. And I'm going, will you come on, we need to get fishing. And he's going, listen, just calm down, sit down, take in your surroundings, watch the river, and just enjoy the experience. That's what I want to get to. I want to kind of get to that level of enjoyment.
185, Bass from the Beach. So to start off, I would travel light. Just a pair of trunks, trainers, and a waistcoat with everything you need. Just a box of flies, leader, and just your rod and reel in. and just walk along the shore looking. And it's nice to be travelling light, to walk looking in search for bass or mullet feeding in the sides. Ideally, trying to find a large open beach so you've got a fair bit of water you can walk along. And the key thing as well is the best time I have found is on an incoming tide. So look at your tide times, and any time from low water as it turns to when the tide is coming in, that's your best bet. I'll explain why in a minute. And I do prefer fishing at the evening time. It's just a nice time to be out. But it doesn't have to be. I've caught fish all through the day at different times. But again, as the tide is coming in. And with this sort of fishing, it's very different, as I said, to a fish in the estuary because you're waiting for the fish to come past you to run up the river. So you've got a window of maybe 2 hours, if you're lucky, before and 2 hours after. But with this, you can fish all the way from low tide right up until high tide. So you've got a lot more fishing time. So once you start walking along the shore, keep looking in probably about 8 inches to a foot maximum of water. You know, I've seen fish cruising around the sides, swimming around in groups. You'll see pockets of them, you will, because they will see you before you see them. And as you're walking down the shore, you'll see a pod of them, maybe 2 or 3 inches sometimes, just swirl and out they go. Now these fish are coming in with the tide, looking for shrimp and other forms of food, which has been washed and stirred up by the incoming tide. 172, Glenda Powell.
And then, you know, you get to a certain stage where you have to make choices in life. And I was working in food factories and I was very young, I was 14, 15, working in food factories, and I was destined to be doing something like that for the rest of my life, I suppose, from where I came from. And I remember my father bringing back a book from work, and he gave it to me as I was the only kind of reader in the family at that time. And he says, "Again, this book's no use to me. You might get some use out of it." And the book was called The Success System That Never Fails, and it was written by a guy called William Stone. And this book was one of those, it's kind of like a self-help book. It was written way back in the 1940s or something. And it was about what the mind can believe and conceive the mind can achieve, you know?
Yeah.
So as a 14-year-old reading this book and rereading it, it's probably one of the only books we had in the house apart from the Bible. And I remember reading it and thinking, as a 14-year-old, I truly believed, Ceri, I might look back now, I mean, It was a fantastic book. So I truly believed I could do anything that I wanted to do if I just set my mind to it and worked really, really hard at doing it, that I would be able to achieve it.
Yeah.
And what a gift to have as such a young person. Because I was there working in my factory and doing my 12-hour shifts, and you know, I'm not doing this for the rest of my life. I'm not doing this for the rest of my life. I'm getting out of here. I'm going to do something different. And I suppose at 18, when you know there was a position come up that I didn't particularly want to take, I decided I was going to take off to Scotland, and told my parents I was going fishing for the rest of my life. So at 18 years old and 2 months, yeah, I know, I'm not joking. At 18 years old and 2 months, I took off to Scotland. I had £1,000, which I'd saved up working in fish and chip shops and factories, and I was also working on a rainbow trout fishery called Lough Corrib down in Portaferry every Saturday and Sunday. And I decided I was going to go fishing and to teach people how to fish for the rest of my life.
169, Craig Barr. I guess that after a couple of weeks, then they'll have the angling pressure on the banks and they'll just move anyway. So they'll be more spread out after a month or two, I guess, then.
Yeah, they are. I mean, early season, they're generally in the areas of the gone, but once you get a lot of anglers on them and boats on them, they will scatter around, but they will tend to still hold tight to the shores.
Yeah. As regards targeting overwintered fish, you know, it's nice to get your arm in early season to get a few stockfish. If you were targeting overwintered fish, would you head for the arms, or they'd mixed in the main basin, really? I suppose there's overwintered fish everywhere, but if you were after them, where would you head for?
If I wanted to catch a big one early season, there's one place I would head, and that is to the South Arm Hideaway Bay. It's a renowned place. You need a tip line, 6-foot tip line, fast or slow tip. 3 or 4 if you can fish them, 18-foot leader, size 10 straight or size 8 grub hook buzzers. Whack it out, off the mouth of the bay, not right into the bay, off the mouth of the bay, and let them drop down. I wouldn't say guaranteed, but that's where they'll be. That's where they always are, and you've got a good chance of catching one.
I wonder
if I
why.
can get a boat on April the 1st when you're allowed up there, because you're not allowed up there until April the 1st. I'll be there.
179, Corrib in May. And then I missed a couple of fish, and they were the splashy rises. What I mean splashy rises, you get the confident rise in a wave, where you get a little dimple or a sup. More often than not, they stick. But when they splash and a thrash and a fly, 50-50, a lot of the time you don't catch them. Now, and what I have found, the reason for this is the fly is sitting too high in the water. Now, what I didn't do this time, I did intentionally. I didn't put any gink. At this stage now, I'm fishing 2 dries, untreated. So after a few casts, they get wet and waterlogged. But that's okay, because what you find is, when you fish in dries, the flies aren't on the water 15 seconds. You know, when you fish in dries, it's just you're covering fish, and usually fish will take in the first 5 to 10 seconds when you're fishing dries. You're covering fish, or they just hit the water, and a fish notice it, and up they come. There's no point leaving the fly any longer. So so by not treating the fly, what I'm actually doing is fishing them more in the film before they sink, and what a difference that made. Because during the next couple of hours, I had another 3 fish, all on the point again, and they were more confident. They were just dimples, just gentle rises, bang, everyone stuck. So that was the key thing. They didn't want it up high in the water. 181, Finney and Dodd.
We're talking about now the turn of the last century, 1900, 1910. There were a number of people who used to fish the lake here. Now, these guys had sort of grown up on the chalk streams of England and had developed the art of dry fly fishing over there. And they came fishing to Arrow for the mayfly because they'd heard about the mayfly. They'd arrive in Dublin, take the train, and they'd be met by the local people who were doing B&B on a horse and trap, and take them from the station in Boyle to their digs and what have you. A different era to now, but these guys would have been, some of them quite wealthy, some of them quite well-known names in fishing circles or even in political circles in Britain. Some of them sort of the ex-British Army Major type who had been maybe to India or wherever and had nothing better to do than fish over there and got into the habit of fly fishing. They had developed this art of dry fly fishing on the chalk streams of southern England, and when they came to Arrow, they saw a huge amount of similarities. Even though there was a big sheet of water, they were able to equate the dry fly fishing on the rivers of England with what was happening on Arrow. And for that reason, they decided that they would try some dry fly tactics on the lakes here.
178, Matthew Fletcher at Chatsworth. Well, thanks for taking time out, Matt. It's good to be in this lovely location.
No, you're very welcome.
I think this is probably one of the nicest locations I've actually been in to do a podcast. And it's what would you say it is? Is the Angler's Lodge?
Yeah, it's just a fishing cabin.
Well, you turn around that corner when I came yesterday. You didn't expect it, do you?
No.
It looks like something from Alaska.
Yeah, it's especially when the snow's down in the winter time as well. You come out, you come around the corner and it's just there. And like I say, you don't expect it.
And you've got the cased fish as well.
Yeah, we've got one of the brown trout from the Chatsworth section that was caught in 1988, and that is a 6 pound 9 ounce brown. And then on one of the other cages, we've got a brown trout from the River Wye, which also we own, and that is from the River Wye, Monsaldale, and that was 1989, and that weighed 4 1/4 pounds, and that was caught by a member called Len Blackwell.
Right.
And was the brown trout, the Chatsworth brown trout, was a story behind that, and the chap that caught it was a guy called Mr. Wheatley, and he was still a member when I started here. And one of the old keepers called Brian, who was about when I was a kid. Mr. Wheatley was fishing in front of the house, and Brian came up and he came round on his rounds, and Mr. Wheatley said, "Oh, look at this trout I've caught, it's absolutely beautiful." He said, "I've taken it, but I'm going to get it stuffed and I'm going to donate it back to the estate." He puffed away on his pipe and he said, that'll be lovely, Colin. So obviously he went away and had it stuffed, but Brian never had the heart to tell him that he'd actually only stocked it in the river about 3 weeks previous, and it was an old brood fish that they'd put in, and he never ever knew. And he died, like I say, probably 10, 15, probably longer, 15 years ago, but he never ever knew that Brian had actually put it in the river 3 weeks previous.
182, Lough Corrib with Kevin Sheridan. Just had a brew with a kettle and some sandwiches, and we were talking about in time they'll be spent coming on the water, and during the time we've been sitting here now, all of a sudden we see 1, 2, 3, 4, and I thought that was pretty impressive. But around us now, there's a few hundred just ready. So what is the norm? What will happen now then? Like, is dampness in the air, so you don't think they'll go out yet?
No, what will happen is that they'll keep dancing low, and they'll keep underneath the trees. So once they feel that dampness, that rain is going to just keep them lowered to the ground. So what to do is that they'll come back into the trees, and underneath the leaves, the leaves will protect them. We've already seen it one occasion where they were actually dancing, and the rain came and they actually went back on. So you can actually see where we're looking now, in between a shed and an old boathouse.
Yeah.
And they're actually underneath the tree. And the tree foliage is actually protecting them for when they go out. You can even see them up on top there. They're actually doing the dance now. So that's the mating, basically, that's happening up there.
It's quite magical, isn't it?
It is. It's really, really impressive. Like, you know, even like when you're out fishing, like this is when you should be in, having a look at what you're doing, why you're fishing this. Like, this is the magic part of it. So like when they go out, they'll basically just go with the wind across the lake. Like, they'll reach the far side of the shore as well. Like, so they'll just come down onto the surface. They won't even sit on the surface. They'll just a little dimple, and then they keep flying, can keep continuing on until they basically run out of energy, and they'll just sit on it, and then you'll have the trout just coming up and taking them.
And see the birds are feeding. A bird went past there.
Yeah. Like, we've seen that over at the river over on the far shore, where the birds have decided that they're going to have their own little meal.
Like, what is the time now?
It's only 5 o'clock.
Is it any certain time where you expect it?
No, like the more it goes on, you're looking at 3 o'clock. If you get a really nice day, really calm day, you could easily see them at 3 o'clock going out. Sometimes the wind actually pushes them out beforehand. So you're basically looking from 3 right up to 7 before they start moving. Yeah. If you get bright sunshine, you're looking maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock before they start moving, and probably into dark. If they don't go out, maybe 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. Like, so it's really up to them. Like, so
some of these fly hatched out this morning.
Yeah,
and they just flew in to the trees.
Like last night when I was here, the spent never went out for some unknown reason. Which was a nice evening, they stayed under. But the way they're dancing now, we'll be looking at a good fall season.
175, Marina Gibson.
I would say, like, I'm not going to say anywhere really specific, but I'm going to say somewhere, I want to say somewhere in Scotland, because that was my first, like, that's where it all happened, it started. And you know what, I would love to turn back time, just to, because I felt like I was the kid that was brought up around fishing and kind of not forced to fish, but like it was just something that we did because our parents our holidays were orientated around fishing. So like we were taken along because we didn't have a choice. Like that was what our parents did, and that's what we were going to do. And that's amazing. And I always thank my parents for that. So I would love to just turn back time on one of those spay days or one of those oikle days and be like with my whole family and be like, have that, like I do this now, but like there's something really special about being there when you're a kid, like having that lunch where, like, I don't know, my mum's organised the lunch and it's all ready for you when you go in that hut, and you get all the like nostalgia around it. And I think it would definitely be one of those Scottish days. There's something very special about that.
Well, I hope you enjoyed part 1 of my Christmas episode. Part 2 will be next week. And also big thanks to all my guests which have appeared on the podcast the last 12 months. And a very big thanks to my Patreons. And if you haven't joined yet, please consider becoming a Patreon and helping the channel, where you'll get weekly podcasts and over 200 episodes, where you can listen to all of the podcasts which are on this Christmas episode. Well, that's all for now. And tight lines. And as always, may they always be up in the wave. Merry Christmas all.